with the new report from House Democrats that alleges the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency, his family business received $7.8 million from foreign governments. Democrats on the Republican-led House Oversight Committee yesterday released the findings of an investigation that began back in 2016 into violations of the Constitution's Foreign Emoluments Clause. The report finds from 2017 to 2019 alone, Trump's businesses received at least $7.8 million from 20 foreign governments. Most of that money, according to the report, came from China, whose government allegedly paid more than $5.5 million to rent out Trump-owned properties during that time. The government of Saudi Arabia, where Trump visited on his first foreign trip as president, paid his businesses more than $600,000. The information stems from documents obtained from Trump's former accounting firm in 2019. The report only covers the first 2 years of the Trump presidency. Once Republicans regained the House majority in 2022, they ended Democrats' their investigation. We know also, Willie, that Jared Kushner, after leaving the White House, got a lot more money from Saudi Arabia. But this also makes the Republicans' investigation into the Biden family over similar types of behavior. It's unbelievable. Just Trump can do anything and Republicans don't care. They just don't care.
And Republicans already, after this report came out yesterday, trying to draw an equivalency with Joe Biden and suggesting that what he did or is alleged to have done, according to them, although they've provided no evidence of it, is somehow worse than this. Let's talk more now with one of the Democrats who authored the report, member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Robert Garcia of California. Congressman, good morning. So take us through this a little bit more. There was an assumption, and in fact, there was some reporting over the course of Trump's first term that this was going on, that he had stepped away from his businesses, but countries knew well that staying at his hotels and giving money to him through his real estate company would be helpful to them in exerting influence over the United States. So what more did you find in this report?
Right. Good morning. And look, it's important to realize first that this is an enormous grift. This is a violation of the Constitution. This is about foreign payments and bribes to the president of the U.S. from multiple foreign governments and countries. And I also just want to note, because it's important, what we have in front of us is really just the tip of the iceberg. The nearly $8 million that we're discussing is essentially just not only a 2-year window, it's only from 4 properties owned by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has hundreds of properties and businesses around the world. And so we were very limited in what we could actually look at. We know that the full scope of the hundreds of businesses and the bribes, it's much larger. But James Comer, of course, who chairs our oversight committee, stopped the investigation immediately. So this is very, very concerning. We demand this investigation to continue and to reveal the full scope of this incredible grift. And the amount of money is not just coming from these 20 governments. We know that there are other countries that we don't have receipts and records for, like Russia, who have made payments to the Trump Organization. And we need to find out the truth. This has both national security implications, but certainly violations of the Constitution.
So, Congressman, you can anticipate, and I know you haven't heard yet from Donald Trump himself or from the campaign, we can expect a Truth Social post at any moment, I expect, but that he would say he stepped away from his businesses, that his sons were running the businesses at the time, and therefore somehow this was okay, that we know he didn't fully divest, we know he never fully steps away from his businesses, but what do you say to that argument that it was in fact his children, his adult children, who were running the businesses while he was president?
I mean, look, I think first, if we remember, Donald Trump actually said years ago that he would be the first person to make money off the presidency. I mean, he said that publicly. We should believe Donald Trump whenever he speaks. In addition to that, I think it's really important to note here when Donald Trump talks about the president or the president's family or they're attacking the president, look at Jared Kushner in Saudi Arabia. Jared Kushner, like was mentioned at the top of the show, got a $2 billion investment fund from the Saudi government after leaving the White House. He was the Middle East envoy during the time in the White House. Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, Trump's first Secretary of State, opposed that and opposed Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner puts together a $110 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, at the same time, is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars that we have records for, because I'm sure it's a lot more than that, on Trump properties here in D.C. and other places. And so this is clearly a major grift, but most importantly, it's a violation of the Constitution. And so Republicans need to do the right thing here. We need to get all the records and information and hold Donald Trump and his family accountable.
So the Jared Kushner and all the stuff that happened after the presidency, let's put aside the grossness of that for a second, Representative Garcia, and talk about why this is a violation of the Constitution, why this is bad for our country, how behavior like this impacts our national security by impacting the president's ability to make a decision, how it exposes America and America's safety through the presidency to other governments, even our enemies.
That's absolutely correct. I think first, let's be very clear that a president cannot take gifts, certainly cannot take bribes from any foreign government while they serve as president, whether they have business interests or not. That is clearly in the Constitution. And so while we've uncovered about $8 million and likely, of course, millions and millions more that we don't have records from, even taking one gift is a violation of the Constitution. And so Donald Trump, this has never happened before in American history, where you have a president taking as much as possible. And so it directly impacts our national security. Was President Trump, was his family, was Jared Kushner, the Middle East envoy, making decisions knowing they were getting paybacks, getting investments into the Trump organization? And it's not, of course, just Saudi Arabia or China. It's Kuwait, it's the UAE, it's Qatar. It's governments that had major national security relationships with the United States. It's governments that had interests with the United States and other foreign powers. And we've got to investigate this fully. I'm committed to that. The Oversight Committee is committed to that. But James Comer and the Republicans want nothing to do with this information.
Of course not. My question to you, though, is as you continue the investigation, and if you do uncover what is alleged here or much more of what you've already found, what are the consequences?
Well, look, I think first, we're going to put together, led by Jamie Raskin, who's a ranking member of our committee, we're going to put together a package of reforms that we're going to present to the Congress to deal with this part of the Constitution, to strengthen laws around this important clause within the Constitution. But the American public have a right to know. One is we want transparency and the full recording of actually what happened. This year, the public are going to make choices within the election, choices about Donald Trump, choices about President Biden, and they have to know the full scope of the corruption, of the con, of the grift, of the illegal activity that Donald Trump performed while he was president of the United States, and how his children benefited and continue to benefit from those investments. The Trump Organization and Donald Trump essentially has created himself as this leader of this organization while in the White House to basically funnel money from foreign governments to himself and his family. That is wrong. The American public deserve to know the full truth, and we're committed to getting that truth.
Congressman, you have evidence here that the Trump family profited while he was in office. That's the exact claim that your Republican colleagues are trying to make about the Biden family, that the Biden family, Hunter Biden, profited from his father while he was vice president. And yet they, of course, have provided no clear evidence of that, unlike what you have done. So tell us how you will bring this to your Republican colleagues. What do you think does this change anything? Are you going to make that argument? And frankly, what do you see as the future of the Hunter Biden probes, which, again, members of your committee are trying to make a central part of President Biden's re-election campaign?
I mean, let's be just clear. There is zero evidence, of course, as we know, that links President Biden with any wrongdoing. Republicans cannot come up with any information or any sort of wrongdoing. And they're clearly projecting. I mean, this report shows where the real grift and corruption and illegal activity is. We have receipts. We have bank records. We have accounting. It's all there laid out in the report, and there's much more that has yet to be uncovered. And so the Republicans, it's incredible to see the hypocrisy that the House Republicans, that James Comer, that the new Speaker are trying to put together with this impeachment scam that they have put together essentially to try to attack the Biden family. But President Biden has no business interests as he serves as president. Donald Trump had a complex web of ways of pulling in money from foreign governments to enrich himself and his family. And so we're going to make that contrast. Clearly, Republicans want to just throw whatever they can at the wall. They've been doing that in the Oversight Committee. But this report is incredibly important. We're going to make sure people know about it. And certainly we're getting this report out to all the Republicans as well.